"Your son doesn't deserve that graduation trip," my dad said. "Not after he refused to give his car to your brother's boy." My son had only said no to handing over the truck he'd saved for 2 years to buy. I didn't argue. I canceled the family beach house I'd paid for, then booked a private resort week for just me and my son. One photo went up. By sunset, my brother called. "You canceled it. What would you do if your father told you your son didn't deserve a graduation trip because he refused to hand over the truck he spent 2 years saving for to his cousin?" My name is Evan Hayes. I'm 44 years old. I run a small electrical contracting business that I started 11 years ago with a truck, a ladder, and the kind of stubborn optimism that only makes sense in hindsight. I've been married to Lena for 20 years. She's a dental office manager. We're not rich. We're not poor. We're the kind of people who check the bank account before we go to dinner and still go anyway because life is short and the pasta isn't going to eat itself. We live in a 3-bedroom house that we've owned for 16 years. The mortgage is almost paid off. The roof needs work. The kitchen hasn't been updated since 2011. We're not flashy people. We're just people who work and save and try to give our son a better starting line than the one we had. We have one son. His name is Caleb. He's 18. He just graduated high school. And this story is about what happened when my father decided that Caleb's graduation trip should be taken away because Caleb had the audacity to say no. But before I tell you what my father said, I need to tell you about the truck. Because the truck is everything. The truck is the reason this story exists and the reason my family is currently fractured and the reason I'm sitting at a resort right now with my son instead of at a beach house with people who don't deserve the sand between their toes. 2 years ago, when Caleb was 16, he came to me and said, "Dad, I want to buy a truck." Not, "Dad, can you buy me a truck?" Not, "Dad, I need a truck." He said, "I want to buy a truck." The distinction matters. It matters because it tells you everything about who this kid is. He wasn't asking for a handout. He was announcing a plan. He got a job at a hardware store the same week. Part-time. Weekdays after school, full days on Saturdays. He started at $11.50 an hour. He worked there for 2 years. He never missed a shift. Not one. He went to school. He went to work. He came home. He did homework. He went to bed. And he did it again the next day. Weekends, he mowed lawns in the neighborhood. 5 lawns at $30 each, every Saturday morning from April through October. In the winter, he shoveled driveways. He charged $20 a driveway, and he'd do 6 or 7 after a good snowfall. Coming home with red cheeks and frozen fingers, and a stack of bills he'd fold carefully and put into a mason jar on his dresser. That mason jar. Lena called it Caleb's retirement fund, as a joke, but there was nothing funny about the discipline it represented. I need to tell you about the jar because it's the physical artifact of my son's discipline. It was a half-gallon mason jar with a slit cut in the metal lid. Caleb cut the slit himself with a Dremel tool in the garage. He put every extra dollar into that jar. Birthday money. The 20 his grandmother slipped him at Easter. Tip money from a landscaping job he helped a neighbor with one weekend. When the jar was full, he'd take it to the bank. When the bank account was full enough, he'd start another jar. 2 years of this. 2 years of patience and consistency and the kind of unglamorous, unposted, un-Instagram discipline that nobody celebrates because it doesn't make for good content. It just makes for good character. He bought the truck the week before his 18th birthday. A 2014 Ford F-150. Silver. Manual transmission. 137,000 miles. Not pretty. Not new. Not the kind of truck you see in a commercial with a mountain in the background. But it was his. Paid in full. Cash. $12,800 earned one shift, one lawn, one driveway at a time. The salesman at the dealership looked at the cash and then looked at Caleb and then looked at me and said, "This is all his?" I said, "Every dollar." The salesman shook Caleb's hand a second time, firmer this time, with a different kind of respect, and said, "Young man, I've been selling cars for 15 years. I've never had someone your age walk in with cash like that. Respect." Caleb didn't know what to do with that. He just nodded and said, "Thank you, sir." The day he went to buy it, I drove him to the dealership. He didn't want me to negotiate for him. He didn't want me to co-sign. He didn't want me to do anything except stand there. He said, "Dad, I just want you to be there when it happens." So I stood there. I watched my 17-year-old son walk up to a salesman, shake his hand, sit down at a desk, and pay for a vehicle in cash while the salesman looked at me like he was waiting for the punchline. There was no punchline, just a kid with a bank envelope and 2 years of proof that he meant what he said. He drove it home from the dealership with both hands on the wheel and a grin I hadn't seen since the morning he unwrapped his first bicycle. He parked it in the driveway and sat in the cab for 20 minutes. Just sat there, touching the steering wheel, looking at the dash, existing inside something he'd built from nothing. I stood in the kitchen window watching him, and I cried. Not because I was sad, because I was looking at a version of my son that was better than I'd been at his age. I didn't buy my first vehicle until I was 23, and I'd used my parents' money for half of it. Caleb did it at 17 with money he'd earned himself. Every dollar. I cried because I was proud, and because I knew, standing in that kitchen, that this boy was going to be okay in the world. Whatever came at him, he had the thing that can't be taught. He had grit. Now let me tell you about my nephew, Brady Hayes, Trent's son, 16 years old. Brady is, and I'm trying to be fair here, the product of a household that has never told him no. Trent and his wife, Kara, raise Brady the way some people water plants. Constantly, generously, and with the unspoken assumption that the plant will grow in whatever direction it wants, and that's fine, because at least it's growing. Brady has a new phone every year. Brady has clothes that cost more than Caleb's monthly earnings at the hardware store. Brady has a gaming setup in his bedroom that could power a small space station. Brady has everything except the thing Caleb has in abundance. The understanding that things cost effort, and effort costs time, and time is the one thing you can't get back. Brady doesn't have a job. He's never had a job. He's 16, and the closest he's come to employment is occasionally helping Trent carry groceries from the car, which Trent counts as learning responsibility. Brady doesn't have savings. He doesn't have a budget. He doesn't have a mason jar. Brady doesn't have a mason jar on his dresser. What Brady has is the unshakable belief that the world will provide, because his world always has. 3 weeks after Caleb bought the truck, Brady asked for it. Not asked to borrow it. Not asked to ride in it. Asked to have it. He walked up to Caleb at a family barbecue and said, "Dude, you should let me have the truck. You can just save up and buy another one." Just like that. Like he was asking for a slice of pizza. Like $12,800 and 2 years of labor was something you could casually request and reasonably expect to receive. Here's the part that makes it worse. Brady doesn't have a driver's license. He has a learner's permit. He cannot legally drive a vehicle alone. He wanted a truck he couldn't legally operate. The request wasn't about need. It wasn't about transportation. It was about possession. Brady saw something his cousin had, something real and earned, and he wanted it. Because in Brady's world, wanting something and deserving something are the same thing. Caleb said no. He said it simply, clearly, and without apology. "Nah, man, that's my truck. I saved for it." He didn't say it rudely. He didn't lecture Brady about work ethic or financial responsibility. He just said no. A complete sentence. A boundary. The most basic expression of self-respect a person can make. He didn't know Brady an explanation. He didn't know anyone an apology. He said no the way a person says no when they know their worth and aren't willing to negotiate it. He was 17 years old, and he already understood something that half the adults in my family still haven't learned. Your labor has value, and giving away the product of your labor to someone who didn't earn it isn't generosity. It's erasure. The most basic expression of ownership a person can make. This is mine. And the family lost its mind. Not immediately. It started as murmurs. Side conversations at family events. Glances exchanged between Trent and Kara when Caleb pulled up in the truck. The unspoken consensus forming in real time. Caleb should share. Caleb is being selfish. Caleb has something Brady wants, and the natural order of this family requires that Brady's wants be satisfied. It was a slow build. A pressure campaign disguised as family values. And the family lost its mind. Trent called me that night. "Evan, can you talk to Caleb? Brady really wants that truck, and it would be a nice gesture." A nice gesture. Giving away a vehicle your child spent 2 years earning would be a nice gesture. I told Trent no. I told him Caleb earned that truck, and he's not giving it to anyone. Trent said, "It's just a truck, man. Family shares." Family shares. The motto of every person who's never built anything they were asked to give away. Kara texted Lena. A long, passive-aggressive message about how some kids are taught to share and some aren't, and how it's sad when material things matter more than family bonds. Lena showed me the text and said 3 words, "Don't engage. Delete." She was right. We deleted it. But the real blow came from my father. Frank Hayes, 68 years old, retired mechanic. A man who has spent his entire life measuring his children against each other and always finding Trent's side of the family heavier on the scale. Frank has never hidden his favoritism. He just dresses it in language that sounds reasonable if you don't look too closely. When Trent's family moved into a nicer house, Frank talked about it for 3 months. When I started my business, Frank said, "That's risky." When Brady made the JV basketball team, Frank went to every game. When Caleb made the honor roll for the 6th consecutive semester, Frank said, "That's good," and changed the subject to Brady's 3-point average. When Trent and Kara went on vacation, Frank watched Brady for a week and posted photos on Facebook. When Lena and I needed someone to watch Caleb for a weekend so we could attend a funeral out of state, Frank said he was busy. This is the man who chose Trent's side of the family every single time there was a side to choose. This is the man who once told me, when I asked why he went to Brady's basketball games but not Caleb's science fair, "Sports are more fun to watch." Like my son's intelligence was less entertaining than his nephew's layup. Like the metric for a grandfather's presence was whether the event was exciting enough to justify his attendance. This is the man who called me on a Tuesday evening and said, "Your son doesn't deserve that graduation trip." Not after he refused to give his car to your brother's boy. He said it with the confidence of a man who believes he's dispensing wisdom. He said it like he was correcting a behavioral problem in a child who had misbehaved. I want you to sit with that sentence for a moment. Your son doesn't deserve that graduation trip. My son, a kid who had worked for 2 years, saved every dollar, bought a truck with his own hands, graduated high school with honors, and said no to an unreasonable request with complete politeness, was being punished by his own grandfather for having a boundary. I didn't argue. I said, "Okay, Dad." 2 words. The same 2 words I've been saying to Frank Hayes my entire life. But this time, they didn't mean what they used to mean. Every other time I'd said, "Okay" to my father, it meant I surrender. This time, it meant I'm done. Same word. Completely different architecture. Calm. Flat. The same 2 words I've been saying to my father my entire life when he makes a declaration and expects the world to reorganize itself around it. "Okay, Dad." The universal language of sons who have learned that arguing with Frank Hayes is like arguing with weather. You can't change it. You can only decide whether to stand in it or walk inside. I walked inside. Let me tell you about the beach house. Because Frank seems to have forgotten who was paying for it. The beach house was a rental on the coast, a 4-bedroom, 2-story property with a wraparound porch and an ocean view. I'd booked it 5 months in advance. The total cost, including the rental, cleaning fees, groceries, gas for 2 vehicles, and a deep-sea fishing charter I'd reserved for the last day, came to just under $6,000. Every cent of it was on my credit card. Not Frank's. Not Trent's. Not a family pot that everyone contributed to. Mine. My card. My money. My name on every reservation. Nobody offered to contribute. I want to be clear about that. When I announced the beach house trip at a family dinner 3 months earlier, I said I'd handle it. And nobody, not Frank, not Trent, not Kara, said let me chip in. Not a dollar. Not a gesture. Not even the polite reach for the check that you know won't be accepted, but you make anyway because it's the decent thing to do. Nothing. They accepted a free vacation the way they accept everything from me. As a given, not a gift. The plan was 10 people. Me, Lena, Caleb, Frank and Diane, Trent, Kara, and Brady. And my mother's sister, Aunt Ruth, who comes to everything and sleeps on the couch and doesn't complain. 10 people. 1 house. 1 week. Paid for entirely by the guy whose son was just told he didn't deserve to go. Frank didn't pay for a single night. Trent didn't buy a single bag of groceries. Kara didn't contribute $1 toward the fishing charter. They were all going to walk into a house I'd rented, eat food I'd bought, sleep in beds I'd reserved, and wake up to an ocean view I'd paid for. And the man writing the checks was being told his son wasn't welcome. The night Frank called, I sat in my home office for about 40 minutes. I didn't tell Lena what he'd said. Not yet. I needed to sit with it first. I needed to feel the full weight of what my father had just done before I decided how to respond. Because responding in anger would have been easy. Yelling at Frank would have been satisfying for about 30 seconds, and then it would have become a fight. and fights in my family get rewritten by whoever talks the loudest, and Frank always talks the loudest. I didn't want to fight. I wanted a result. A result that was so clear, so structural, so undeniable that it couldn't be rewritten or minimized or reframed as an overreaction. I just sat there and looked at the booking confirmation on my screen and thought about 12 years of this. 12 years of Frank favoring Trent's family. 12 years of Caleb getting less attention, less praise, less presence. 12 years of me funding family events that treated my son like a supporting character. And now this. The final entry in a ledger I'd been keeping in my head without realizing it. I picked up my phone. I called the beach house rental company. Hi. I need to cancel a reservation under Evan Hayes. For bedrooms, 1 week, checking in Saturday. The agent confirmed. Canceled. Full cancellation, minus the non-refundable deposit, which I accepted as the cost of a lesson 12 years overdue. Then I opened my laptop and searched for resorts. Not beach houses. Not family rentals. Resorts. Private ones. The kind with pools and cabanas and room service and the specific kind of quiet that comes from not having to share a refrigerator with people who think your son's truck is communal property. I found one about 3 hours south, a boutique resort on the coast, adults and families, ocean view suites, a pool with a swim-up bar for me, and a water sports program for Caleb. I booked a suite for 7 nights. 2 beds. Ocean view. Breakfast included. It cost more than the beach house. I didn't care. Some expenses are financial. This one was moral. The beach house was a family obligation. The resort was a father's choice. And the difference between an obligation and a choice is the difference between surviving and living. I told Lena that night. She sat on the edge of our bed and listened to everything. Frank's call, the cancellation, the resort booking. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You should have canceled that beach house years ago." She paused. "And I want you and Caleb to go. Just you two. He needs this from you. Not from the family. From you." Lena is the smartest person I know. Not because she has the most information, but because she understands people at a frequency the rest of US can't hear. She knew that Caleb didn't need a family vacation. He needed his father to stand next to him, visibly and publicly, and say, "You did nothing wrong. You are not being punished for having boundaries. And the people who tried to punish you don't get to share in the celebration they tried to take from you." I told Caleb the next morning. Not the full truth. Not Frank's comment. Not the cancellation. I said, "Change of plans, bud. Instead of the beach house with everyone, I'm taking you somewhere better. Just me and you. Father-son trip. Your graduation present." His face lit up. Not the way it would have if I'd told him about the family drama. That would have been a different light, a harder one. The kind that comes from learning your grandfather thinks you deserve less. This was the pure, uncomplicated joy of an 18-year-old who just found out his dad is taking him somewhere cool. Seriously? Seriously. Just us. Just us. He grinned. The same grin from the truck dealership. The grin of a boy who doesn't need much to be happy, just the knowledge that someone sees him. Lena drove us to the airport. Yes, I flew us there. Because if you're going to make a point, make it properly. Lena hugged Caleb at the curb and whispered something in his ear that made him laugh. She looked at me over his shoulder and mouth. Give him the best week of his life. I intended to. We left on Saturday. The same Saturday the family was supposed to arrive at the beach house. I didn't tell anyone about the cancellation before we left. I didn't send a group text. I didn't call Frank. I didn't warn Trent. I just packed the car, loaded Caleb's suitcase next to mine, and drove south. The resort was better than the photos. It was the kind of place that makes you realize how much of your life you spend in rooms that don't have ocean views. The lobby smelled like salt air and fresh flowers. The staff called Caleb sir, and he looked at me like they'd mistaken him for someone important. I said, "You are someone important." "You too, O1D, he rolled his eyes. But he smiled. The resort was better than the photos. Ocean view from the balcony. A pool that seemed to melt into the horizon. A restaurant on site that served the kind of food you photograph before you eat. Caleb dropped his bag on the bed, walked to the balcony, stood there for about 10 seconds, turned to me, and said, "Dad, this is insane. You earned it, bud. I didn't earn this. You earned the truck. This is me saying I'm proud of you for earning the truck." He nodded. He got it. He always gets it. That's Caleb. We spent the first day doing nothing. Pool. Food. Silence. The kind of silence that isn't empty but full. The shared quiet of two people who don't need to perform being happy because they just are. I watched my son float in a pool with his eyes closed and his arms spread, and I thought, this is what a graduation trip looks like when it's not designed by committee and funded by obligation. This is what celebration looks like when the person being celebrated actually gets to be the center of it. At 4 p.m., I took a photo. Caleb and me at the pool. Ocean behind us. Both of us smiling. Caleb's hair was wet and he was holding a glass of lemonade, and he looked exactly like what he was, an 18-year-old kid on the best day of his summer, with a father who chose him. I posted the photo. One photo. No caption. No explanation. No passive-aggressive message. Just the image. Me and my son. At a resort. On the day the family beach house trip was supposed to begin. I didn't add a location tag. I didn't tag anyone. I didn't write anything about the beach house, or the cancellation, or the truck. I just posted two people at a pool looking happy. And I posted it at 4 p.m. because I knew, with the precision of a man who has been in this family for 44 years, that 4 p.m. on Saturday was exactly when everyone would be arriving at the beach house. Or trying to. The call started at 4:47 p.m. I was sitting on a lounge chair by the pool with a drink in my hand, and my son doing backflips off the diving board 20 feet away. My phone was face down on the towel beside me. It started buzzing, and buzzing, and buzzing. I picked it up and watched the notifications stack like a tower of dominoes falling in reverse. Each one a name from my family. Each one a different shade of the same emotion, panic. Trent was first. I let it ring. He called again. I let it ring. He texted, Evan, what the hell? We're at the beach house, and it's locked. The rental company says it's been canceled. Then Kara texted Lena. Do you know what's going on? We drove 3 hours and the house is canceled? Lena replied, Yes, I know. Nothing else. 2 words. Lena is surgically efficient with text messages. Frank called at 5:12 p.m. I answered this one. Evan, what the hell is going on? Trent says the beach house is canceled. It is. What do you mean it is? I canceled it. Silence. The heavy, bewildered silence of a man who is not used to consequences. Why? Because you told me my son doesn't deserve a graduation trip. So I canceled the trip. The whole thing. I didn't mean cancel the whole. You meant that Caleb shouldn't go? And since I'm the one paying for everything, I decided that if Caleb doesn't go, nobody goes. More silence. I could hear him breathing. The heavy, recalibrating breathing of a man who has just discovered that his words have consequences and he doesn't like the arithmetic. Then, that's petty, Evan. No, Dad. Petty is telling an 18-year-old he doesn't deserve a celebration because he won't give away something he spent 2 years building. That's petty. What I did is called a consequence. He hung up. I looked at my phone. 11 seconds of silence. Then the screen lit up again. I expected it to be Frank calling back. It wasn't. It was Trent. 11 minutes after Frank hung up, which means Frank called Trent the moment we disconnected, and Trent needed 11 minutes to process what he'd heard before picking up his own phone. Trent called 11 minutes later. His voice was different from Frank's, less authoritative, more panicked. The voice of a man who has just driven 3 hours with a car full of luggage and a family full of expectations and arrived at a locked door with no plan B. You canceled it? Evan, we're standing in the driveway. Brady's upset. Kara's furious. We don't have anywhere to go. Trent, I paid for that house. Every dollar. You didn't contribute a cent. You were going to spend a week at the beach on my money while your son was demanding my son's truck and Dad was telling Caleb he didn't deserve to be there. That's not a family vacation. That's an entitlement program with an ocean view. This is because of the truck? It's just a truck, Evan. It's not just a truck, Trent. It's 2 years of your nephew's life. Every shift, every lawn, every frozen driveway. And your son, who doesn't even have a license, asked for it like it was a video game he could borrow. And when Caleb said no, Dad took away his graduation trip. A trip I was paying for. In a house I booked. With money I earned. If that math doesn't make you uncomfortable, Trent, nothing I say will fix it. He was quiet for a long time. I could hear Brady in the background asking what was happening. Kara was saying something sharp I couldn't make out. Then Trent said, We can't just. We're here. Can't you just rebook it? No, Evan, book it yourself, Trent. It's about $4,000 for the week. Plus groceries. Plus the fishing charter. Call me when you've got your card on file. He didn't call back. Because Trent couldn't afford it. That's the part nobody talks about. Trent couldn't afford the beach house. He couldn't afford an alternative. He couldn't afford a hotel for the night. The entire vacation, the entire week that his family was looking forward to, existed only because I was funding it. And the moment my money left the equation, the vacation evaporated. The driveway they were standing in might as well have been a mirror, because for the first time, Trent was seeing the shape of his family's lifestyle without my checkbook holding it up. Diane called that evening. My mother. The quiet one. The one who has spent 38 years married to Frank and has mastered the art of standing next to loud opinions without voicing her own. She said, "Evan, your father is upset. Trent is upset. Everyone is upset. I know, Mom. Can't you fix this?" I didn't break it, Mom. Dad broke it when he told me Caleb didn't deserve a trip I was paying for. I just responded. She was quiet. He shouldn't have said that about Caleb. That was the closest Diane has ever come to criticizing Frank. 6 words, barely above a whisper. But I heard them, and they mattered. The rest of the resort week was everything the beach house was supposed to be and more. Caleb and I went deep-sea fishing, a private charter, just us and the captain. Not the group charter I'd booked for the beach house where 10 people would have been crammed on a boat arguing about who gets to hold the rod. A private boat. 2 rods. Open water. The captain's name was Luis, and he told the worst jokes I've ever heard, and Caleb laughed at every single one. Just us, a charter boat, and a captain who told terrible jokes and caught a mahi-mahi that Caleb fought for 12 minutes. We ate seafood on the pier. We rented jet skis. We sat on the balcony at night and talked about things we never talk about at home. His plans for the fall, the trade school program he's interested in, the girl he likes but hasn't asked out, the kind of man he wants to be. He said something on the 4th night that I'll carry for the rest of my life. We were sitting on the balcony, ocean in front of us, stars above, and he said, "Dad, thanks for not making me feel bad about the truck thing. You didn't do anything wrong, Caleb." I know, but Grandpa made it seem like I did. And you didn't. You took my side, without making it a big thing. I looked at my son, 18 years old, sitting in a resort he didn't know was booked because his grandfather tried to take his graduation trip away. And he was thanking me for not making it a big thing. The kid who saves his money and says please and mows lawns in the heat and shovels driveways in the cold was sitting there being grateful that his father stood up for him quietly. "Caleb," I said, "you built something with your own hands. Nobody gets to take that from you. Not your cousin, not your uncle, not your grandfather, not anyone. And if standing next to you while you protect what's yours means the rest of the family doesn't like me for a while, that's a price I'll pay every time." He didn't say anything. He just nodded. And we sat there, looking at the ocean, and the silence between us said more than any speech I could have written. We got home on a Sunday. Monday morning, Frank showed up. He stood on my porch with coffee from the gas station and a face I'd never seen on him before. Not anger, not authority, but something smaller. Something that looked like the beginning of accountability, even if it hadn't fully formed yet. "I shouldn't have said what I said about Caleb," he said. Not "I'm sorry." Frank doesn't say sorry. But "I shouldn't have said it" was closer to an apology than anything I'd heard from him in 44 years. "No, you shouldn't have," I said. "That boy worked harder for that truck than most adults work for anything. And you tried to take his celebration away because he wouldn't hand over what he built." Frank looked at the ground. Trent was in my ear about it. He made it sound like Caleb was being selfish. Caleb said no to giving away his truck. "That's not selfish, Dad. That's self-respect." He stood there for a while. Then he said, "Tell Caleb I'm proud of him. For the graduation. And for the truck. Tell him yourself, Dad. He's inside." Frank looked at the door. He took a breath. He walked in. I heard Caleb say, "Hey, Grandpa." I heard Frank say, "Show me that truck, bud." Lena came home from work that evening and found me standing on the porch with cold coffee. She didn't ask what happened inside. She could hear it. The truck engine, Caleb's laugh, Frank's voice saying something about the transmission that sounded almost like interest, almost like care, almost like a grandfather. "Is that your dad?" she asked. "Yeah. About time." She went inside. I stood on the porch and listened to them walk to the driveway together. The truck started. The engine rumbled. And for the first time in a long time, something in my family sounded right. Trent hasn't called me since the beach house. I don't know if that's pride or shame or just the silence that fills the space where a relationship used to be when the funding stops and the favors dry up and the person who was always writing the checks finally puts the pen down. I don't miss the calls. I miss the brother I thought I had. The one who existed before I realized that our relationship was transactional and I was the only one making deposits. Kara unfollowed Lena on social media, which Lena considers a gift. She also blocked me, which I consider an even bigger gift. Brady posted a vague Instagram story about toxic family members with a sad face emoji, which is the closest he's come to self-reflection since he asked for a truck he can't legally drive. Brady, as far as I know, still doesn't have a license. And the truck is still in Caleb's driveway. Silver. Manual transmission. 141,000 miles now. Not pretty. Not new. But his. Every bolt. Every mile. Every dollar. A truck that a 16-year-old boy decided he wanted and an 18-year-old man paid for with 2 years of his life. That's not a vehicle. That's a monument. And nobody, not his cousin, not his uncle, not his grandfather, gets to put their name on it. Every bolt. Every mile. Every dollar. The truck is still in the driveway. Caleb washes it every Sunday. He changes the oil himself. He keeps the interior cleaner than most people keep their kitchens. Last week, he drove it to his first day at a community college where he's starting an electrician's apprenticeship program. He wants to learn the trade. He wants to work with his hands. He wants to build something real, the way he built the savings that bought the truck, the way his father built the business that paid for the resort, the way men in this family used to build things before some of them decided it was easier to take. I didn't lose my family. I just stopped funding the part that didn't respect my son. They told him he didn't deserve the trip. I gave him a better one. Some lessons don't need words. They just need a canceled reservation and a photo at sunset.